On April 12, 1961, the Soviet news agency TASS broadcast a message that stopped the world. A Soviet citizen, Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin, had left Earth. He had circled the globe at 17,000 miles per hour. He had looked down from 108 miles above the surface and seen the curve of the planet beneath him. And he had come back. The human species had, for the first time in its history, sent one of its members into space and returned him alive. The West was stunned. Kennedy was informed at breakfast. NASA engineers wept. A senator called it a catastrophe worse than Pearl Harbor. And in a bunker in the Kazakh desert, the man who had made it happen sat down quietly and lit a cigarette. The world celebrated Gagarin. His face was on every front page on Earth. He toured capitals. He met the Queen. He shook every hand there was to shake. But there was a question nobody could answer. Who built the rocket? The Soviets offered nothing. No name, no face, no institution. The man behind Sputnik, behind Laika, behind Gagarin himself, was described only as the chief designer, an anonymous engineer somewhere in the Soviet system, identity classified at the highest level. He could not receive the Nobel Prize. When the Nobel Committee tried to award one for Sputnik, Khrushchev refused to name him. The most important engineer of the 20th century was a state secret. And the reason for that secrecy was not what you might expect. His name was Sergei Pavlovich Korolev. He was born in 1907 in Zhytomyr, a city in what is now Ukraine. His parents separated when he was 3. He was raised largely by his grandparents. He discovered flight at the age of 6 when a military biplane landed in a field near his home. He ran toward it. The pilot let him climb up and look inside the cockpit. He never got over it. By 16, he was designing gliders. By 22, he had a degree from the Moscow Higher Technical School and had begun the most important friendship of his life. In the 1920s, there was a small but serious community of people in the Soviet Union who believed that human beings would one day travel to space. This was not science fiction as far as they were concerned. It was mathematics. A self-taught Russian schoolteacher named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky had worked out the fundamental equation of rocket propulsion decades earlier. He had calculated that a sufficiently powerful multi-stage rocket using the right propellants could reach orbital velocity. He had been largely ignored. The young Korolev read Tsiolkovsky, and then he read him again, and then he started building. In 1931, Korolev and a colleague named Friedrich Zonder founded GEARD, the Group for the Study of Reactive Motion. It operated out of a basement in Moscow. They had almost no money. They built their equipment by hand from salvaged parts. They ran tests in a Moscow park to the bewilderment of passing citizens. Their colleagues called the acronym a joke. GEARD, they said, stood for Group of Engineers Working for Nothing. But they produced results. On August 17, 1933, Korolev's team launched the first Soviet liquid-fueled rocket. It flew a few hundred meters. It was enough. The Soviet military was watching. In 1933, GEARD was absorbed into a new government institution, the Reactive Scientific Research Institute. Korolev was made deputy director. For the first time, he had resources, a real facility, engineers who were paid. The work accelerated. Rockets, cruise missiles, gliding bombs. Korolev worked across it all, pushing every boundary available. He was 26 years old and moving at the speed of a man who has found his purpose. He had perhaps 4 years before the world fell in. In 1937, Joseph Stalin began what historians call the Great Purge. It was, by design, a system of engineered terror. Millions of Soviet citizens were arrested on fabricated charges. Confessions were extracted by methods that had nothing to do with truth. People were shot, exiled, sent to labor camps. No profession was exempt, no institution, no level of society. The scientific and engineering community was devastated. Brilliant people, people building the future of the Soviet state, were arrested, tortured, condemned. The charge was almost always the same: sabotage, espionage, wrecking. The evidence was almost always the same: none. Korolev's arrest came in June 1938. He was accused of deliberately sabotaging his own rocket program, of being a wrecker, an agent of deliberate Soviet defeat. The man who had spent the last decade building the Soviet Union's most advanced rocket technology was accused of trying to destroy it. The arrest was triggered, at least in part, by testimony from colleagues. One of them, Valentin Glushko, a brilliant rocket engine designer who would go on to work alongside Korolev for decades, gave testimony that contributed to his arrest. Whether it was coerced, calculated, or opportunistic, the historical record remains disputed. Korolev never entirely forgave him. Korolev was interrogated for weeks. He maintained his innocence. This was, in the Stalinist system, essentially irrelevant. The interrogation methods employed by the NKVD were not designed to establish truth. They were designed to produce confession, signed documents that justified decisions already made. What happened to Korolev's jaw during those interrogations, whether it was struck deliberately or injured in a fall, whether it was broken once or many times, is something the historical record leaves incomplete. What is certain is that when he emerged from interrogation, his jaw was damaged, and it never healed correctly. That fact would follow him for the rest of his life. Sergei Korolev was sentenced to 10 years in a corrective labor camp. The trial lasted a few minutes. He was allowed no defense. He had signed a confession extracted under conditions that would not, in any system that called itself just, be recognized as consent. He was 31 years old. His sentence was later commuted in the bureaucratic manner of the Stalinist system from 10 years to 8, then modified again. The arithmetic of his punishment shifted as the paperwork moved through levels of a system too large to track individuals within it. None of the modifications changed where he was going. He was sent to Kolyma. Kolyma. Even among the gulags of the Soviet system, and there were hundreds, Kolyma occupied a special place. A remote peninsula in Russia's far northeast, nearly as close to Alaska as it is to Moscow. In winter, temperatures dropped to -60°C. The wind made it worse. The camps there processed gold from the permafrost. The method was manual labor. Prisoners with picks and shovels working in those temperatures on starvation rations under guard. The mortality rate at Kolyma in the late 1930s was roughly 1 in 3 per year. Sergei Korolev, the man who would one day put a human being in orbit, spent 1938 in those mines. Korolev's mother is what saved his life. Ksenia Koroleva wrote letters to officials, to institutions, to anyone who might have authority over her son's fate. She found, eventually, a path to an appeal. The Soviet system contained within its machinery the possibility of review, not out of justice, but out of the occasional recognition that it had condemned people it still needed. Engineers were useful. Rocket scientists were particularly useful. In 1939, an order arrived at Kolyma. Transfer Korolev, SP, to Moscow. He had weighed less than 45 kilograms when they pulled him from the mine. Korolev was transferred not to freedom, but to something stranger. The Soviet state had developed a particular institution, a Sharashka, a design bureau staffed with prisoners. Scientists, engineers, and technical specialists who had been arrested and condemned were gathered together in facilities that were physically prisons. They lived under guard. They worked under supervision. They could not leave. But they were fed. They were given materials. They were expected to produce. The Shuroshka Korolev was sent to was run by one of the most distinguished aircraft designers in the Soviet Union, who was also a prisoner. Andrei Nikolaevich Tupolev was one of the greatest aircraft designers in history. He had been arrested in 1937, charged with selling aircraft designs to the Germans, a fabrication so obvious that even the NKVD officers who processed it likely knew what it was. He was running the Shuroshka. He had, within the constraints of his captivity, managed to build something functional, a prison design bureau producing real aircraft that the Soviet Air Force actually flew. When Korolev arrived, broken by Kolyma, Tupolev took one look and understood what he was looking at. A rocket man, not an aircraft man, but a mind. And Tupolev knew how to use minds.
In the Shuroshka, Korolev began to recover. Not fully, never fully. The damage from Kolyma, the cardiac episode, the scurvy, the jaw, was permanent in ways that would not be evident for decades. But he was eating, he was warm, he was doing the only thing he had ever wanted to do. He designed a rocket-assisted glider for the Shuroshka's aircraft program. He worked on other assignments. He did what was asked of him because it was engineering, and because doing it bought him the time to stay alive. And he watched, he learned, he understood the system he was inside. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German troops crossed the Soviet border at dawn, the largest land invasion in human history. Within months, German forces were at the gates of Moscow. The Soviet Union mobilized everything it had, including its prisoner engineers. The Shuroshkas were moved east, away from the German advance. Production accelerated. The prisoners, still prisoners, were working around the clock on weapon systems the survival of the nation now required. In 1944, after 6 years of imprisonment, 2 in the labor camps, 4 in the Shuroshka, Korolev was released. Not pardoned, not apologized to, not compensated. Released. The charges against him were not publicly withdrawn. His reputation was not restored. His conviction remained on record. He was simply handed civilian clothes and told he could go home. He was 37 years old. He had been imprisoned through the most productive years of his professional life. He had lost teeth and nearly his jaw, and very nearly his heart, to the Soviet state's appetite for consuming its own people. And he went back to work. The war ended in May 1945, and immediately a new competition began. Both the United States and the Soviet Union were racing to capture Germany's rocket technology, specifically the V-2 program, which had produced the first operational ballistic missile in history. The Americans got the senior German engineers, including Wernher von Braun, who surrendered to American forces deliberately. The Soviets got the factories, the hardware, the documentation, and they sent Korolev to Germany to understand what they had. When Korolev returned to the Soviet Union, his mission was clear: build the Soviet Union a ballistic missile. Build it better than the Germans. Build it better than whatever the Americans were building. Build it now. In 1946, he was appointed chief designer of long-range ballistic missiles, the most important engineering role in the Soviet Union. He was given a design bureau, engineers, resources, a level of support the pre-war GIRD could never have imagined. His name was classified. His face could not be photographed. He was known only as the chief designer, or in internal documents, by his initials, SP.
The weapon the Soviet military wanted was an intercontinental ballistic missile.
a rocket capable of carrying a nuclear warhead thousands of kilometers, launched from Soviet soil and landing on American cities. Korolev designed it, the R-7 Semyorka. But as he designed it, something else was happening in his head. A rocket capable of carrying a nuclear warhead to the edge of space is also, with modification, a rocket capable of carrying something else. A satellite, a probe, an instrument package, eventually, a person. The military wanted a weapon. Korolev was designing a spacecraft. He just wasn't telling them that yet. To launch the R-7, Korolev needed a place no one knew about. The decision was made to build a launch facility in the Kazakh steppe, remote, flat, secret, Baikonur. In 1955, construction began. Korolev was involved in everything, not just the rocket, but the launch infrastructure, the communication systems, the handling equipment. He was present at Baikonur through all of it, in his unmarked engineer's uniform, the man whose name was on every critical document and none of the buildings. By 1957, the site was ready, the R-7 was ready, and Korolev had a question for the military. In the summer of 1957, Korolev went to Khrushchev. He explained, carefully, that the R-7 had excess capacity, that a successful ICBM test was within reach, but that before that test, it would be possible, with minimal modification, using the same rocket, to launch a small satellite into orbit. No practical military value, Korolev acknowledged, just a small sphere with a radio transmitter, just the first artificial object ever placed in orbit around the Earth, just the beginning of the space age. Khrushchev, who had a politician's instinct for the propaganda value of spectacle, said yes. October 4th, 1957, at 10:28 p.m. local time, the R-7 rocket ignited on its launch pad at Baikonur. It carried in its nose cone a sphere approximately 58 centimeters in diameter. It weighed 83 kilograms. It contained 2 radio transmitters and 3 silver-zinc batteries. It had 4 antennae swept back along its body. It was called Sputnik, the Russian word for fellow traveler. The rocket cleared the launch tower. It accelerated through the atmosphere. It reached orbital velocity, and it released the sphere into the black. 96 minutes later, Sputnik completed its first orbit of the Earth, and the world changed. The signal was simple, just a beep, repeated every 3 seconds. American radio operators picked it up immediately. Amateur radio enthusiasts across the world confirmed it. There was no question. Something made by human hands was circling the Earth every 96 minutes. The United States had been beaten. To space, to orbit, to the future, beaten by a country they had been told was scientifically backward. In Washington, the mood was something between panic and humiliation. In Baikonur, Korolev, whose name the world did not know, poured 2 glasses of vodka and handed one to his launch director. He already knew what came next.
Sputnik proved a rocket could reach orbit. The next question was whether a living organism could survive it. The answer would have profound implications for the human program that Korolev was already planning in private. In November 1957, 1 month after Sputnik, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2. It carried a dog. Her name was Laika. She was a stray from the streets of Moscow, selected, the scientist noted, because stray dogs had learned to endure cold and hunger, which made them better suited to the stresses of spaceflight than pampered pets. She had been in training for approximately a week. There was something the Soviet public was not told. Sputnik 2 had no recovery system. There was no plan to return Laika. The technology to re-enter the atmosphere safely did not yet exist. The mission was designed to test the physiological effects of spaceflight on a living organism, to gather data, to prove the principle. Laika would die in orbit. Korolev knew this before the launch. He spent the evening before with Laika at the facility. He later told colleagues it was one of the things he could not completely make peace with. She died approximately 5 to 7 hours into the mission. The spacecraft continued to orbit until 1958.
Laika's mission provided what it was designed to provide. A living organism could survive the acceleration of launch. It could survive weightlessness. The cardiovascular and respiratory data was positive. Korolev had what he needed. He already had his candidate cosmonauts, a group of 20 military pilots selected from the Soviet Air Force, young men with the specific physical and psychological profile he had defined. He also already knew, with the certainty of an engineer who does not deceive himself, what the risks were. A human being in a spacecraft atop a rocket was the most dangerous thing he could imagine putting a person in. He would not put one there until he was as certain as he could be. Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin was 25 years old when he was selected as a cosmonaut candidate. He was the son of a collective farm carpenter and a dairy worker. He had qualified as an aircraft pilot through his own application and ability, not through connections or privilege. He was 5'2". The short stature helped in a spacecraft not designed for comfort. But what Korolev noticed about Gagarin was something different. When Gagarin came to inspect the Vostok spacecraft for the first time, he removed his shoes before climbing the access ladder. He didn't want to dirty the craft. Korolev never forgot that. By 1961, the race had become explicit. American newspapers reported that NASA was preparing to launch a man into space, the Mercury program. Alan Shepard was training. The flight could happen any month. Khrushchev, who had used Soviet space achievements as instruments of political power since Sputnik, was not prepared to be second. He called Korolev. The instruction was clear: be first. Korolev had 2 more unmanned test flights planned before he would consider putting a human being in the Vostok. He conducted one. The morning of April 12, 1961, Baikonur Spacedrome, the Kazakh steppe. Gagarin was helped into his orange spacesuit at 5:30 a.m. His backup, German Titov, received the same preparation, both suited until the final decision was confirmed. At the launch pad, the R-7 rocket stood under floodlights in the dark before dawn. Fueled. Ready. Korolev had not slept. He met Gagarin at the base of the launch gantry. They embraced in the Russian manner. Korolev's expression was visible to the people present, the only moment in the accounts where multiple witnesses used the same word to describe it. Afraid. He was afraid. At 9:07 a.m. Moscow time, the R-7 engines ignited. Korolev in the control bunker heard Gagarin's voice on the radio as the rocket began to move. Poyechali. Let's go. The rocket cleared the tower. Korolev watched the instruments. Each stage performed. The velocity built. Then the velocity was orbital velocity. Then there was silence from the rocket and only Gagarin's voice on the radio. Calm, informative, almost conversational. He was in orbit. For 8 minutes, Korolev did not breathe normally. Gagarin's flight lasted 108 minutes. He observed that the Earth from space was strikingly blue, that the transition between the lit side and the dark side was sharp and beautiful, that weightlessness felt natural once he stopped expecting gravity. He re-entered the atmosphere over Africa and ejected from the capsule at 20,000 feet. The Vostok's landing system required the cosmonaut to land separately by parachute. He landed in a field near the Volga River. A farmer and her daughter saw him come down. He asked them to call Moscow. They didn't know who to call. He was the first human being to return from space. Nobody had a protocol for this. Gagarin was celebrated, immediately, extravagantly, globally. His face was on every publication. He was given the highest Soviet honors. He shook every hand on Earth that mattered. Korolev received nothing publicly. Khrushchev's logic was specific and peculiar. If the chief designer's identity were known, he could be killed by Western agents. His anonymity was his protection. There was perhaps also another logic. An anonymous engineer can be more easily contained than a celebrated one. At the celebration dinner for Gagarin's flight, Korolev sat among his engineers, unidentified to the official guests. He ate quietly. He accepted no toast. He had done the most important engineering work in human history, and he was allowed to know it privately. After Gagarin, the program moved at the speed of political demand. In August 1961, German Titov spent a full day in orbit, 17 revolutions. In June 1963, Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space, orbiting the Earth 48 times. Each mission was a Korolev mission, each one planned, designed, and overseen by the chief designer. The American space program watched, measured, competed. Kennedy had announced the moon goal in May 1961, the month after Gagarin's flight, and NASA was working with the focused urgency of a program that knows it is behind. Korolev knew the moon was the next target. He was already thinking about how to get there. On March 18, 1965, Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov became the first human being to walk in space. He exited the Voskhod 2 spacecraft through an inflatable airlock at an altitude of 500 kilometers and spent 12 minutes outside. He nearly died. His spacesuit had inflated in the vacuum to the point where he could barely move his fingers. He had to partially deflate it to re-enter the airlock, risking decompression sickness. He got back in. He survived. Korolev at Baikonur had aged measurably in those 12 minutes. By the mid-1960s, Korolev was dealing with a problem he could not solve by engineering. His relationship with Valentin Glushko, the engine designer who had signed testimony against him in 1938, had never recovered. They worked in the same program. They needed each other. Korolev's rockets needed engines, and Glushko built the best engines. But Glushko would not build what Korolev needed for the moon. He insisted on propellant combinations Korolev considered unsuitable. Korolev went elsewhere, to an engine designer named Nikolai Kuznetsov. The division that followed, design bureaus working at cross purposes, the lunar program fractured by personal history, would contribute directly to the Soviet Union's failure to reach the moon. Korolev's lunar rocket was called the N-1, where the American Saturn V used 5 enormous F-1 engines in its first stage. The N-1 used 30 NK-15 engines, a design decision that reflected the engine politics as much as the engineering. 30 engines burning simultaneously required an orchestration of fuel flow and combustion that the computational tools of the 1960s struggled to model. The N-1 never flew successfully. All 4 of its test launches, after Korolev's death, ended in explosions. The second exploded on the launch pad and remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. But that story belongs to what happened after. What happened before was this. In 1965, Korolev was 58 years old. He had spent his adult life at the edge of impossible deadlines, in conditions that would have broken most people, with the accumulated physical damage of the Gulag compounded by the accumulated psychological weight of secrecy. He was diagnosed with cardiac arrhythmia. His doctors wanted him to slow down. He did not slow down. He complained of pain that he minimized and dismissed, because to acknowledge it fully would mean stopping, and stopping was not something he had ever allowed himself. The jaw, that jaw that had never healed correctly, that had been damaged in an interrogation room in 1938, gave him chronic pain that he had managed for 27 years. He managed it now. He kept working.
In January 1966, Korolev was scheduled for what was described as a routine operation. He had intestinal polyps that required removal, a minor procedure. He checked into the Kremlin hospital on January 5th. He was, by all accounts, in reasonable spirits. He expected to be back at his desk within a week. There was too much to do for longer than a week. The Soyuz program, the lunar preparations, a dozen other threads he held together by the specific quality of his attention that the program could not replace. He did not know what his surgeon had not yet discovered. When the surgeon opened the operation, he discovered not polyps, but cancer. Rectal cancer, significant, requiring a longer, more complex procedure than had been planned. The operation would take hours. General anesthesia requires intubation,
the insertion of a breathing tube down the patient's throat to maintain the airway. The anesthesiologist attempted to intubate Korolev. The jaw broken in the NKVD interrogation room in 1938, the jaw that had never received proper treatment, the jaw that had healed incorrectly across 27 years, would not open wide enough. Standard intubation was impossible. Without a secure airway, a patient under general anesthesia cannot breathe adequately. The surgical team, working inside a system where the patient's identity had been so classified that the surgeon had not received a complete medical history, had not known about the jaw, had not had time to plan for alternatives, attempted improvised solutions. They were working inside the consequences of a decision made in 1938. The decision to arrest Sergei Korolev, the decision to interrogate him in ways that broke his jaw, the decision to send him to Kolyma rather than treat him, the decision to classify his identity so completely that the people responsible for his life did not have the information they needed to save it. Sergei Pavlovich Korolev died on the operating table on January 14, 1966. He was 59 years old. The official cause of death listed cardiac failure. The full circumstances, the jaw, the intubation failure, the inadequate medical history, the consequences of Gulag imprisonment were not disclosed. He had been a state secret in life. He remained one in death, briefly, for perhaps 48 hours. On January 16, 1966, Pravda, the Soviet Union's official newspaper, published an obituary. It named, for the first time, the chief designer, Sergei Pavlovich Korolev. It described his achievements: Sputnik, the first human in space, the first spacewalk, the rocket program that had given the Soviet Union its strategic nuclear capability. It included a photograph. The photograph was the first time most of the Soviet public and most of the world had ever seen his face. He had been the most important engineer alive. Nobody had known his name. Korolev was given a state funeral. His ashes were interred in the Kremlin Wall, the highest honor of the Soviet state. Khrushchev was no longer in power by 1966, but the new leadership understood what they had lost. The cosmonauts were there: Gagarin, who would die 2 years later in a training aircraft, Titov, Tereshkova, Leonov. They stood at the bier of the man who had made their flights possible, a man most of them had been forbidden to publicly acknowledge during his lifetime. Gagarin, in his uniform, all his medals, stood for a long time at the open casket. He said nothing that was recorded. Korolev had held the Soviet space program together, not just technically. The program was a web of competing design bureaus, political pressures, military priorities, and personal conflicts. He navigated all of it simultaneously, using authority, persuasion, and occasionally the force of his personality alone. When he died, the web began to separate. The N-1 lunar rocket program fractured further. Test launches failed. The Soviet moon program, which had seemed so close to beating America in 1966, was never able to produce a reliable heavy-lift rocket. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon's surface. There were no Soviets.
Korolev's last design was the Soyuz spacecraft. He did not live to see it fly. The first crewed Soyuz mission in 1967 ended in tragedy. Cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov died when the parachute system failed on re-entry. Korolev's death had left gaps in oversight and quality control that had not yet been filled. But the Soyuz was fundamentally sound. Modified, updated, and continuously improved over 6 decades, it became the most successful and reliable crewed spacecraft in history. At the time of this documentary, the Soyuz, or its direct descendants, has carried human beings to space more times than any other vehicle. Korolev's last design outlived everything else. In 1961,
the Nobel Committee wrote to the Soviet Academy of Sciences to inquire about nominating the designer of Sputnik for the Nobel Prize in Physics. The Soviet response was that the achievement was collective and could not be attributed to any individual. The Nobel Prize for Sputnik was never awarded. Later, when the committee tried again and asked Khrushchev directly who should receive the prize, Khrushchev reportedly said, "The Soviet people." No prize was ever given. Korolev's anonymity was so complete that even an international committee attempting to honor him could not overcome it. The man who opened space to humanity received no international recognition in his lifetime. In 1956, Korolev received a document that stated his 1938 conviction had been reviewed and found to be without foundation. He was, in the Soviet terminology, rehabilitated. No apology, no compensation, no acknowledgement of what had been done to him. Just a piece of paper that said the charges were false, which everyone who had known him in 1938 had known then. Korolev filed the document and went back to work. He did not discuss his imprisonment except on rare occasions with close colleagues, usually late at night when the work had finally stopped for a few hours. He said once that what the camps had given him, besides the obvious damage, was the knowledge that he could survive anything the world could do to him. He was right. He survived everything except the operating table. There is an account from colleagues who were present of a conversation between Korolev and Gagarin sometime in 1963. Gagarin asked Korolev why, given everything, given Sputnik, given the first human in space, and the undeniable magnitude of what he had done, he never pushed for recognition, never used his leverage to force the public acknowledgement that was clearly his. Korolev was quiet for a moment. Then he said that the work was what mattered, that the rockets were the monument, that he would rather put another human being in space than have his name on a building. Gagarin looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "I would have done both."
The R-7 Semyorka, which Korolev designed in the early 1950s, is still flying today. Not the original vehicle, but every Soyuz rocket, all 2,000 launches and counting, is a direct descendant of Korolev's design. The same fundamental architecture, the same strap-on booster arrangement, the same basic configuration. In 2011, when the American space shuttle was retired, the Soyuz became the only vehicle capable of carrying humans to the International Space Station. For 7 years, the only rocket flying humans to orbit was a design originally drawn by a man who had recently returned from a gulag. For most of the space race, American engineers and astronauts were competing against an unknown. They knew a chief designer existed. Intelligence services had fragments, a name perhaps, some physical description. But the full picture, who he was, what had been done to him, where he had come from, was not available. When the Cold War ended and the Soviet archives began to open, Western researchers found the complete story. Several American astronauts who had lived through the space race gave interviews after learning the full account of Korolev's life. Their reactions, without exception, were the same. How did we not know? In various photographs of Elon Musk's office and private spaces over the years, one book appears consistently, a biography of Sergei Korolev. Musk, who has said that he became interested in space because of frustration with what he saw as the stagnation of human spaceflight after the moon landings, has cited Korolev multiple times as a foundational influence. The man who was building the next generation of rockets, larger than anything Korolev designed, aimed at destinations Korolev dreamed about, keeps the story of the prisoner who built the space age somewhere visible. Whether that is tribute, inspiration, or both depends on how you read it. After Korolev's death, Valentin Glushko eventually became head of the Soviet space program. He continued to build, he continued to achieve. He was, by any technical measure, one of the greatest rocket engine designers in history. He outlived Korolev by 23 years. Whether he ever directly addressed what happened in 1938, the testimony, the consequences, is not clearly documented. He continued to work in the same field Korolev had dominated. He built rockets that flew from the same launch pad at Baikonur.
History does not always arrange itself into clean reckonings. Sometimes the people who cause the harm and the people who absorb it simply continue to exist in the same world. Glushko died in 1989. He is buried, like Korolev, with honors. The Gulag did not only take time from Sergei Korolev, it took his health, it took the proper alignment of his jaw, it took the cardiac reserve that might have sustained him longer. It took, probably, years from the end of his life. The historian Asif Siddiqui, who wrote the definitive English-language account of the Soviet space program, has made the calculation that if Korolev had lived another decade to 1976, a reasonable lifespan for a man of his time, the history of the space age might have been entirely different. The N-1 lunar rocket, under his direct oversight, might have flown. The moon race might have been closer than it was. Or the Soviet Union might have beaten America to the moon by 3 years. We will never know, because the NKVD broke his jaw in 1938. Korolev had a daughter, Natasha, from his first marriage. His first wife, Senia, divorced him while he was in the Gulag. He was largely absent from Natasha's childhood, first imprisoned, then consumed by the program, then classified, then dead at 59. Natasha became a doctor. She has given interviews about her father in the decades since his identity was revealed to the world. She describes a man she knew primarily through brief visits and the awareness that whatever he was doing was more important than she was permitted to know. She says she is proud of him. She says also that she would have liked to have known him better. Baikonur Cosmodrome is still operational today. Russia leases it from Kazakhstan. The Soyuz rocket still launches from pad number 1, the same launch pad that the R-7 used for Sputnik, for Gagarin, for all of it. The launch pad is officially called Gagarin's Start. There are monuments at Baikonur. There is a museum. There are photographs on the walls of all the launches that have departed from this stretch of flat Kazakh steppe. Korolev's face is on many of them. His name is on the main street of the facility's support town. The anonymity lasted exactly from his death to the front page of Pravda, approximately 48 hours. After that, the state could not contain what it had suppressed. In 1972, the crew of Apollo 17 photographed the Earth from space. The image, the whole planet, fully lit, suspended in the black, became known as the Blue Marble. It is one of the most reproduced photographs in human history. There is a direct and traceable line from that image to Sergei Korolev. Not because he launched Apollo 17, he didn't, that was his competitor's program, but because he launched Sputnik in 1957, which forced America's hand, which accelerated NASA's program, which produced Apollo, which produced the crew that took the photograph. Everything in the space age traces back to somewhere. A significant portion of it traces back to a basement in Moscow in 1931, where a young man in a leather jacket was building rockets from salvaged parts. There was an image that is almost unbearable to hold in your mind. Sergei Korolev in 1938 in the Kolyma gold mines. He has lost most of his teeth to scurvy, his jaw has been damaged and will never fully heal. His heart has already shown the first signs of the arrhythmia that will eventually be part of what kills him. He weighs perhaps 45 kilograms. He is working in the gold mine at -50 degrees Celsius under armed guard. And somewhere in his head still is the equation, Tsiolkovsky's equation, the mathematics of orbital velocity, the sphere with 4 antennae that he has been designing in the only space nobody can search, the inside of his own mind. He is still building rockets, in the gold mine, in the dark, at 50 below. He never stopped. Tsiolkovsky's rocket equation says this: the velocity a rocket can achieve depends on the exhaust velocity of its propellant and the ratio of its initial mass, fully fueled, to its final mass when the fuel is gone. To reach orbit, you need approximately 7.9 kilometers per second. To achieve that with chemical rockets, you need a mass ratio of approximately 10 to 1 or better. 90% fuel, 10% everything else: structure, payload, people. What the equation does not contain is any variable for the quality of the person who built the rocket. It does not contain a variable for imprisonment, for scurvy, for a broken jaw. It does not contain a variable for the fact that the man who solved it spent 2 years in Kolyma first. The equation is neutral. The history is not. Sputnik re-entered the atmosphere and burned up in January 1958. The sphere is gone. The beep is gone. The radio signal that stopped the world faded after 3 weeks when the batteries ran out. But the moment it created is permanent. October 4th, 1957, the night humanity first placed something in orbit, is a fixed point in history, before and after. The world before Sputnik and the world after Sputnik are different worlds. The man who made that division, the prisoner, the engineer, the chief designer who could not be named, made it happen from the inside of a system that had already tried to destroy him. He outlasted the system by approximately 1 year. He outlasted the system's attempt to suppress his name by 30 years. He is outlasting the system still. In the Korolev family, there is an account of the few possessions Korolev carried with him to Kolyma. Among them was a small notebook, damaged in the transit, barely legible by the time he returned. In the notebook were calculations, orbital mechanics, the mathematics of trajectories and propellants and mass ratios. He had been working in the notebook before his arrest. He had, apparently, taken it with him because he could not bear to leave it behind. He could not have known in 1938 that the notebook's contents would eventually fly, that somewhere on the other side of the gold mine and the interrogation room and the Sarashka and the decades of secretive anonymity, on the other side of it all, there was an orbit with his name on it. Finally. Sergei Korolev was a man who built the future while the present was trying to kill him. He was arrested by the state he served, imprisoned by the system he worked for, silenced by the government whose greatest achievements he made possible. He survived the gold mine, he survived the cardiac episode, he survived the scurvy, the interrogation, the secrecy, the decades of being the most important person in the room nobody was allowed to acknowledge. He put the first satellite in orbit, he put the first human being in space, he built the rocket that is still flying today. He was identified after his death by a photograph in a newspaper, and Elon Musk keeps his biography on his desk, and the Soyuz rocket still launches from Baikonur, and the orbit, in its mathematics, does not care who built the machine that reached it. But we should.